Yo, what's up guys, I'm here with another video. This is going to be a Samira Mid Lane, I guess, guide you can call it. If you don't know who I am, I'm currently Master Elo. I'm a Samira Mid Lane one trick. I don't play Samira bot lane, I play her mid lane only. I have around 2 million mastery points in Samira. I've played many accounts to like Diamond Plus with almost Samira pretty much exclusively only. So this video will be pretty much for people that want to try out Samira mid. They want to know what the matchups are like. Like if you want to know what it's like, you don't want to go through the suffering and like learning the bad matchups and the good matchups, this video will be perfect for you because I'll just be going over them. Full disclosure though, before I start the video, I don't think Samira mid lane is great. I think it's a really decent counter pick into certain matchups, but picking Samira every single game is kind of suffering. But in the lower elos it can for sure work, but once you get higher up in like Diamond Plus, I would not recommend picking Samira mid every single game because you will suffer. But there's a lot of really good fun matchups where Samira is actually like pretty decent and where you can for sure stomp and carry the game or your rank games with it. If you do enjoy the video or it helped you out in any way, or you just like Samira like me, please consider subscribing or just liking the video. It would help me out a lot. And yeah, let's start off the video. I'll be going over what is like good for Samira and what is bad for Samira specifically in the mid lane. I won't be going too much in depth about every champ, but I do want to point out what like the really good ones and the really bad matchups are. If you look at the top row here, you can obviously see like a trend, and it's mostly the melee matchups, because obviously ranged into melee champions is usually pretty good because it's easier for you to bully your lane opponent. It's easier to trade while they have the ranged advantage. They have to walk up for farm, you just hit them with your auto attacks. That alone will already win you most matchups. But besides that, in all these matchups, W gets a lot of value. For example, Wing a Z Q when he's ulting, like you can W like all his Qs and he will do virtually no damage to you. You can W a Yasuo Q, which is his knockup unless they EQ you. Silas is also a really good matchup. You can W his ult so he can't even steal from you, but you can also just W his chain ability, which is actually a lot of his damage. You can W an Echo Q, which makes it so he has to do one more auto attack for his passive proc. And it's also just a big damage swing if you can W that from his kit. And then there's Katarina, which is one of the best matchups you can have mid lane. You kind of just counter all around. It's easier for you to bully her than normally. If Katarina is a rough lane, she Qs you and then dashes towards the daggers, but you can just W a Q and then play aggro, and then she has pretty much nothing for you. And when you're both ulting, you pretty much just out damage. So it's a pretty fun and easy lane to play. There's also the occasional Pyke mid. I've played against Pyke mid a couple times, like I would say like maybe 50 times or something. And it's just a really good mid lane matchup. Like for a while, Pyke mid was meta. Now it's not really anymore, but you still see it sometimes. But a lot of people don't know that even Pyke supports will often roam to mid lane and they will try to gank me, and they don't realize that I can W their dash that stuns. So they'll be trying to stun me with that, and I W it, and now they're in melee range with no escape, right? Because they just used their mobility spell, which is also their stun. Now they're in melee range and you can just kill them for free. Yone and Yasuo are like okay matchups. They're pretty good, but you can lose them. I don't know if I said this before, but every matchup is like winnable or losable. Like it's unplayable some, and some are really good, but obviously if you mess up or they mess up, you can still win or get an advantage. Samira into Yasuo is also pretty good. You can actually just hit him through the wind wall with your melee auto attacks. A lot of people don't expect that. So the top row is for sure like the really decent matchups, the ones that you can pretty much always win or should win the majority of the time, or what you can call a counter pick, I guess. The row below that are like decent matchups that you can lose, but more often than not you should win these as well. There's just a lot of like specific little things that can win you these matchups. For example, Twisted Fate, like obviously Wing a gold card has a lot of value, right? Or Wing a Kiana ult, or Wing an Aurelia E or ult so she can't get another dash on you, so you're just out damaged. Just stuff like that will win you the matchup, but if you mess it up you could still lose the matchup. But the second row is just mostly decent matchups. They're not like insanely good, but you should win these more often than not. The middle row is what I would call the neutral matchups. These are pretty much 50-50, maybe slightly favored. Like Samira into Fizz is like okay as long as you W the ult. Samira into Aso can be a bit rough if they play pretty far back and just like laser beam you and you can't really go in. Same with Lux, like a Lux can stand really far back and just E you and you can't really do anything unless someone helps you or they just like mess up. These are all like kind of situational. You can win these, but if they have a brain or are just very good at the game, you could struggle in these matchups. It can go either way, to be honest. Then when you get to the second last row, these are the pretty bad matchups. When you see these picks, I already kind of don't really want to play Samira anymore. Samira performs pretty poorly into all of these champs in the lane. As you can see in this one, it's mostly long range poke mages. And the main reason is that Samira just really struggles to get on these champions if you have no setup on your own. Like for example, a Vel'Koz or a Zoe that sit really far back. How are you gonna get onto them if they don't walk up to you? You can like E to a main for distance, but that will only get you so far. Syndra is particularly bad because even when you do E onto her, she can E you back, and then you are just sitting there with no gap closer. It feels terrible. It feels like a really bad lane, a really boring lane. Every time you E forward, you get E backed. You can W the E sometimes, but it feels extremely unreliable. And sometimes when you E in and the W doesn't work, and you got hit by the E and now you're stunned and she hits you with a W, you are kind of just dead. So it's too risky. It's the same with Azir. Azir will poke you from far away. You can E onto him sometimes, but again, you can W the Azir ult, but it's pretty unreliable as well. And the problem is if it doesn't work, or it like bugs out, or slightly in the wrong position and you do not W the Azir ult, okay, now he just ulted you under turret and you don't have E, so you're dead. Orianna, another long range poke mage. Xerath, another long range poke mage. Cassiopeia is kind of bad because you just get grounded so you can't even E when she puts the goo on the ground and you stand in that. You can take cleanse in this matchup and it's slightly better, but it's still pretty bad. Gragas is obviously also really bad because every time you E him, he just E's you. When you see Gragas in the jungle, that's also maybe a sign you don't specifically want to go Samira that game. They did change it so you can now W the Gragas ult, which is kind of nice, but it's still a pretty bad matchup. And then at the bottom row, there is the completely unplayable matchups. If you see any of these anywhere in the game, to be honest, but mostly versus mid lane, I would just recommend either dodging or you are going to suffer for most of the game. The worst one of these is probably Heimerdinger. How even just think about it, how do you even play versus Heimerdinger? You E under his turrets and then you're just dead or what? Like, it's unplayable. Annie, you just kind of get countered because you cannot W her W, so you always get stunned if they have half a brain. You can W the Q, but why would they ever Q you when they can just W into a Q with no counterplay on your part? Queu has too much range, she has a fear, so it's also unplayable. Lissandra, when you E in, she can either W or ult you, no counterplay. The only thing you have going for yourself there is that you can sometimes, when you do gank the Lissandra, like your jungler helps you, and she tries to E away, you can W the E, so she can't actually teleport to it, but that's about the only thing you have going for yourself in that matchup. Talia kind of feels like Cassiopeia, but worse. You cannot E because of her little pebbles on the ground, they will stun you, and she is just repeatedly throwing rocks at your throat, and it's not very nice. Vex, unplayable, probably one of the worst ones as well from this list. If she holds the passive fear on her, and she just holds it on W, you can never go in. Legit never. You E in, she W fears you, okay, well GG, wait another 30 seconds to repeat the cycle. Well, you probably lost half your health bar. Unplayable. Then there's Victor. Thank god there's not that many Victor players. I would perm ban this champ if he had a higher pick rate. Unplayable matchup again. If you do actually E onto a Victor, he puts a W down and you can't play really around it. He will poke you from very far away with his E and you cannot W it. And then the worst part of the matchup is that his ult cancels your ult. It will interrupt your ult. Unplayable. Then there's Zac. Zac is just really bad. Too much CC. You don't ever really want to play versus this champion as Samira preferably. And then there's Nico as well. Also just really bad. Like, what champion wants to get in melee range of a Nico? So you can root it into a knockup for fun? Nope. Pretty bad as well. So yeah, pretty much if you see any of the top 2 row champions, Samira is probably a really fun and decent pick. If you go towards the middle row, it's still playable, you can probably have fun, you could win a few times, you could lose a few times, and in the bottom row, if you see any of those champions, you're probably going to suffer. Next up is the build. I've tried to record this like multiple times now, but I feel like I just talk way too much about the items with like irrelevant info, so I'm just gonna keep it kind of simple. If you want to build you can force every single game, I would recommend going Infinity Edge into Collector, into Lord Dominik's, into a Bloodthirster, into whatever really. There's a big like debate constantly going back and forth about like Collector versus Lord Dominik's, but I feel like it's never specifically about Samira. I think Collector on Samira is really good no matter what, unless it's just like super expensive. So I think right now it's okay, but IE is really good at the moment, which is why I rush it almost every single game. You can go Collector and skip Lord Dominik's if you are on a big win streak and opt into like a BT into like the mid game, so you can maintain your bounty, your kill streak gold, while still building damage at the same time, because BT is like a survivability and offensive item. If they have a bunch of tanks and a bunch of bruisers and you feel like Collector is not that good, you can just skip it and go Lord Dominic's second, although the Lord Dominic's second win rate is really bad for Samira. But that could be just because when you're building Lord Dominic's second, you are probably already playing into tanks and bruisers, which is normally not what you want to be playing against when you're Samira. You want to be playing into like the squishy champs that you can one-shot and get resets off. So naturally, if you're building Collector second, the game is already looking better for you than it would if you're building Lord Dominic second, if that makes sense. But I pretty much always go Collector first or IE first. It kind of depends how the gold lines up. If I have a good buy for like Pickaxe or BF Sword, I will probably end up going IE first. If I have like really unfortunate early game, I might just go for like Collector because I might just only be able to afford like double Longsword or something like that. But usually 99% of the time I just go IE first, into Collector, into either a Lord Dominic's or a BT. That will pretty much be your core build in most games. Almost always that will be your build. Also, I'd like to mention, when I play Samira Mid, I do not see myself as the designated tank killer. So let's say they have a tank, I'm not going to be specifically building to kill that tank, right? I'll be building to kill their carries, their mid laner, their jungler, not to kill like their top lane tank or their support. No, I'll be the one that's killing the carries, like one-shotting them. For boots on Samira, you pretty much only have 4 options. It's either armor boots, mercs, berserker's greaves, or move speed boots. All of them are okay. Obviously, you just have to look at the game and see what is better in that specific game. Do they have a lot of CC and magic damage? Then you just go mercs. Do they have a lot of like attack champions, AD damage? Then you just go armor boots. I do want to say though that very often I'm not specifically building for my lane opponent. I could be playing into like a Zed, but still end up building mercs because they have like a Sejuani jungle and like, I don't know, like Cho'Gath top and a Braum bot lane. If you don't have mercs, then you can't really play the game unless you have cleanse, but then you're taking cleanse into Zed. So I'd rather just build mercs then and, you know, still have a summoner for my matchup, if that makes sense as well. I don't really ever build berserker's greaves, but the win rate on it apparently is not that bad. I might try it out a few times, but honestly I kind of like just having mercs most of the time. Move speed boots are, I think, underrated on Samira. They're pretty good into like certain specific matchups. If they have like a bunch of like Rylai's users, which slows you a lot, or specifically a Nasus who has a Wither, sorry I have hiccups, then the move speed boots can be pretty decent as well. After the 4 like core items that I mentioned, BT, Lord Dominic's, IE, and Collector, Shield Bow is a viable option. It's a pretty decent defensive item. Also matches well with IE because it gives you more crit for your IE damage bonus. Sadly, they removed the lifesteal of it, so I feel like it's a bit worse, but it's still a pretty decent item. Serpent's Fang is very viable on Samira when you need it. X Drinker is okay on Samira if you're playing into a lot of AP burst champions. Jack Show is okay as a defensive item. Death Dance is okay. Randuin's into crit users is fine. Guardian Angel is a very good buy if you're on a big kill streak or you think it's going to be the last fight in the game. Then there's some like random items that you could build on Samira. I personally don't really know how good they are. For example, Yuntal Wild Arrows is a new item that recently came out. I've never really built this once. Could be good. I think it's probably okay. It's AD and crit. I don't really know how good the passive is, but you could build it on Samira. I do want to mention Ghostblade though. I do think this is actually a decent item for Samira Mid, especially if you're going with like an Electrocute lethality build, maybe like Youmuu's into Collector into IE. It helps you roam a bit better, so it's not even that bad. I used to build this mid for a while, but back then I think it was a little bit better. I think it got a little bit nerfed after that. Let's talk about the summoner spells real quick. You can kind of take whatever you prefer. I think TP is fine if you're in a really bad poke heavy lane where you're not really going to be 1v1ing that much. Exhaust is fine into Assassins. Ignite is fine into Assassins to like counter aggressively play versus them. Ignite is really good in specific matchups like Silas where you kind of need the anti-healing specifically. Cleanse is really good when you're playing versus something like Cassiopeia where like cleansing the ult can actually win you the fight. I don't really take cleanse if it doesn't really help me in the mid lane. You could do that. I personally don't really do that. Exhaust is never really bad though. Exhaust is fine, cleanse is fine, TP is fine, ignite is fine. You can probably even go barrier if you prefer that. I don't really like barrier that much though. So a lot of people are probably wondering, how do you actually play? How do you actually win the lane? What do you do as Samira Mid? And to start at that, I kind of have to say that there's 3 different types of matchups. There's one where you take TP and it's just a heavy poke lane. You take second win TP and you just play to farm and to play around your jungler and play for like the late game to get your items and the team fights. Then there's the matchups that are playable, but you kind of have to whittle them down. For example, an Asol, you can't really E into an Asol level 1, 2, or 3 when they're full HP, because they will just laser you down with a Q and you will lose. So you kind of have to go for short trades, like look for a minion to put you in melee range maybe, you can get onto him and then Q auto back out until they're low enough for you to like either flash all in, or again use the minions to get onto them. That will probably be the majority of your matchups where you're like Q spamming, trying to get optimal trades, negating damage with your W, which you'll be doing in every matchup by the way. Every matchup where you want to trade optimally is trying to get rid of their damage with W while trying to land your damage on them, of course. An example would be, for example, an Ahri Eing towards a minion or towards the Ahri, getting in melee range, Wing either a Q or a charm, and then trying to trade auto attacks and Qs, and because you W'd one of her spells, you're most likely winning that trade, especially if your W hits the Ahri as well. That's how most your matchups should go if you're playing it correctly. Then there's also the good matchups when you're playing range versus melee. How you play that lane is just you are punishing them whenever they try to farm. You try to auto attack them as much as possible until they're again low enough for you to all in. The great thing about Samira is that she's really good in the 2v2. You have a lot of burst, especially when you hit level 6, you do a lot of damage. So especially when you are fed or ahead, you have a couple kills, you really want to try and be in every fight. When I'm ahead, I have 2 items or I have a full item. I try to be in every fight I can be in. I try to roam bot to be in the fights there. I try to help my jungler out as much as possible, while still of course trying to pick up my ways. But you want to be in those fights. Samira is a great team fighter. You don't want to just sit there and AFK farm and scale for the late game, because most champs outscale you anyway. You want to be there snowballing, being in the fights, killing everyone. One thing you have to like keep an eye out when you're playing Samira Mid is you really have to look at the map. I know a lot of people kind of struggle with like map awareness and just like figuring out where the jungler is, where the support is, but like an enemy roaming support or getting camped on Samira Mid feels really bad, because when you E forward, that's it, you're in there and there's no real way for you to get out except for just walking away. So when you're Eing in and there's a support waiting in the bush like an enemy support or the jungler, you are most likely dead unless you can 1v2. So you really want to be mindful of where the jungler is their bot laner showing, could he be mid right now? You always want to keep that in mind when you're Eing forward aggressively. You also really need to look at the enemy comp and your own comp when you're playing Samira, because obviously Samira is better with setup, which is why Samira Nautilus is like such a good bot lane, because it's like perfect and engage with a knock-up support. And you have to realize when you look at your own comp, like what is my setup here? Who can I play off? Do I have a Leona support who can engage for me? Do I have maybe, I don't know, a Sejuani jungle who can hard engage? Then if you do, try play around those people as much as possible. You can still go for 1v1s, but later into the game when you're team fighting, you want to be hovering those champs for when they can set you up to go into a fight. And you also have to look at the enemy comp. If they have a Poppy jungle, you want to stay away from the Poppy as much as you can in the fights, right? Wait out the W so you can actually E. What champions can counter me? What ability should I look out for? What do I need to W in the team fights? Just stuff like that will help you win games and figure out how to play your lane and how to play like the mid to late game. I don't really like split pushing on Samira. I know that very often as a mid laner you have to go to a side lane. When I'm ahead, I don't really like doing that. I kind of like, it's gonna sound bad, but I like forcing my AD carry to just go to a side lane while I stay mid or stay with the team, so I can actually just kill people. It feels really bad to sit on side lane when you're a fed Samira, because like I said before, you really want to be in those fights. And if you're sitting on a side lane with no TP, that feels kind of bad. If you do have TP, I guess it's fine. I just want to mention the runes real quick. I'll keep this one very short though. This is a page this is what I'll be taking most of the time. This is kind of like a standard Samira page where you kind of try to snowball, you have sudden impact for a little bit more damage, treasure hunter to get like bounties going. I really like presence of mind. A lot of people do not take presence of mind when they play bot lane Samira, which is fine, but mid lane you kind of really need the mana, especially if you're poking a lot with your Qs. Triumph doesn't really do anything in the 1v1, it's better in the 2v2 bot lane, but mid lane 1v1, this doesn't do anything for you unless you already have gotten a kill. Well, this actually helps you get those kills, and it's the same with Absorb Life, so I would rather just get Absorb Life or Presence of Mind. I think both are better than Triumph in the mid lane. Bloodline for lifesteal, Conqueror obviously, because Conqueror is just good on Samira. Last Stand is decent, Cut Down if they have a lot of tanks. Coup de Grace like okay, I think. You can go Taste of Blood over Sudden Impact if you prefer to have some extra healing. Eyeball Collection is okay. Treasure Hunter is okay, and these are pretty much always the minor keystones you want to run. You could go double Adaptive Force, you have a little bit less attack speed and more AD, but I don't think it's that good. This is like the main page, but if you're versus like a poke champ, what you can do is just go into the resolve tree, and you can go Second Wind plus Overgrowth. Or Bone Plating if you're into more of like an assassin matchup. This one is a bait. I feel like this one is not good on Samira. Every time I look at this, it has done nothing for me throughout the whole game, and the winner on it is really, really bad. Apparently Unflinching is pretty decent win rate wise, so I would either take Overgrowth or Unflinching. Those are pretty much the only like viable, or not viable, there's also, but those are like the standard rune pages. If you want a completely different page, what you could do is go into the domination tree and just go either Electrocute or Dark Harvest. They've both just been buffed. And then your page would look something like this, where you're just pretty much playing an assassin with more burst. This would also be like a fine page that you could run, and you could swap it out with Dark Harvest, maybe even Hell of Blades. I actually need to do some experimenting with that, but this is what your rune pages will mostly look like when you play Samira Mid. So that's pretty much all you need to get started with Samira Mid. I will give some final like end tips, I guess, or like tiny mechanical things that might help you out or get some extra kills. One thing is that you can E over walls with Samira, so that might help you like escape from time to time, or maybe even just kill someone. It's as simple as like, oh, that guy is there, you can obviously just E over the wall. But you can also like, maybe someone's chasing you, maybe this is your turret, you're being ganked, you're somehow running here. What you could do is when he's chasing you, you just walk slightly back, and then you just E over the wall like that, and you created some distance. Maybe they don't have a dash and that like gets you out of there. Another thing is that you can E towards turrets and over inhibitors, which can help you take a turret down, because obviously you get the attack speed boost. So if you're hitting a turret, this will give you attack speed after Eing towards it. It can also help you dive someone. Maybe this guy is low and he doesn't know you can E towards a turret, and he'll be like, hold up, there's a smear in my face now, I'm dead. True. Another tip is that you can cancel your W to start R early. So let's say you have max stacks and you press W, but you want to R instantly. You can cancel the W by just pressing R as soon as you can. Another small thing, your W can hit twice for 2 stacks, which is a part of the fast Samira combo if you didn't know that. That's the fastest combo you can do. It's auto, W, EQ, W, auto. The W will hit twice because you E in the middle, and that way you can get the max stacks in like pretty much half a second. Alright, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, like I said before, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video.